Hi, I'm Mark, welcome back to Three Bridges. So building the first of the frameworks to take the two inclines up. So I've got all the parts, main parts made, and I've just basically done a test assembly. So I'm going to have one incline going to come up here, and then the second one is going to come up this channel here. What I've now got to work out is where this one cuts through and joins these coast lines. So what I've got to work out is where these points cut through this end piece. So I'll go up in the loft and work that out, and then how far around they come to the start, so that I can cut these two curved sections. Back in the loft, so this is where I got to last time. So this will be where the east coast line is coming up, and this is my 4th radius template. So you can see it sort of curves around. So it's going to cut through this part of the framework, then it has to go through the underneath of the next sort of B frame. And if I've got my calculations right, it should be 15 centimeters from the back where that incline carries on up. What I just haven't worked out yet is the distance away from this end board, but I can get a rough idea now from here. So I'll take a few measurements, and then I think the sensible thing to do is to cut this inclined curved one first and fit that through, and if I'm happy with it, then it'll give me the fixing point where it needs to cut through the end of this frame. So this frame's a bit more interesting to build than the normal ones. The normal ones you just basically put the outer frame in and then put the cross struts in. Because I've got a ramp coming up in the middle, and I don't yet know where where it's going to sit. I'm sort of building it knowing that I will have to take some of it apart again to build it. So built the back section, and that's pretty much stayed where it's going to be. This end bit's going to have to come off at some point so I can do the cut through. But what I've got next is effectively there's going to be an incline coming up here. So I've got some spacers I'm going to use underneath just to give the gap, because I don't know where the incline's exactly going to be sitting at about this point where the curve comes around, the 4th radius curve. So I'll build that, and then effectively I start building the second half of the frame. We'll see how we get on. Getting these frames in is always a bit of a squeeze because there's literally a couple of millimeters at each end. Anyway, this one's in. So at this end it's being held on one of the bolts, and then at the other end I put a temporary support band just so it takes the weight of it. So that's the position I need to have it. The bolt gives me the alignment. So what I can work out now is where this cut through is going to fit, so that it ends up between those two struts over there. So I'll bolt this in place temporarily. So I've got a couple of reference points. So this end, I left this end longer until I know exactly where it's going to be, and I can recut it. And I'll put a supporting plate underneath, and then that follows the edge of this, and then it's going to cut through, and then I can mark up here where the cut through will be. This part here, so this is where it then runs straight, so that will be the end of this board. So I'll mark that up so I can cut that out as well. And then because I've got, that's the end of that board, I'll put another cross strut here just to strengthen it. It's finally stopped raining. It feels like it's been raining for like 3 weeks. That was a day of snow. Anyway, today it's sunny. It's going to be dry. I'm going to get out to the beach. But firstly, I can get on with this. Of course, the other good news this morning was the sun came up whilst I was having breakfast. I feel like the end of winter is coming. Snowdrops are out. Saw my first daffodil yesterday. Spring is coming. And whilst I was up in the loft yesterday, it wasn't so cold. First night for a long time as well. Feels good. Okay, so where did we get to? So just pan back a bit. So this end I need to cut through here. This is where the incline 4th radius comes round to go up this channel, and I can cut this bit off here now, rejoin this through, and I've got a vague calculation which I'll go with, that the height of a depth here that the incline should be at, which was 110, so it's about a centimetre below. This is, so as it's coming round here, it should be 120, so it'll have dropped a centimetre. And so my clearance is 70 millimetres, so what I'll do is basically cut through at 50 so that I've got some structure. Don't forget this also gets bolted to the main B-frame, which is going to have a cut through, and then the other side which will have a cut through. So the 3 pieces of wood will make up quite a substantial chunk. So the fact that it's quite a dramatic cut through isn't really an issue. I can cope with that. By the time it gets to the other end, it'll have risen a certain amount, and I think my depth should be 65 millimeters from the top of the frame. So what I'll do is I'll put a piece in with those sort of dimensions, 65, and then down to the bottom here, and then just check it's actually the 2% gradient, and check I've got my calculations right. Okay, so I've got the first curve section in for the East Coast line, so it's in here, and there's enough clearance through the framework to sit the carriage, so that'll come around to here, and then this is the steady 2% slope up. So it's sort of going to start emerging from lower down about here, a tunnel. So above here I've got a baseboard that I can use. What I now need to do is to get the West Coast line curve in. That one comes in front of this one, but it's the same 4th radius curve, so I can use that template. Basically I know that it has to finish there and come around, so I'll get that sorted first. Okay, so this was the 4th radius curve that I was using to take the East Coast line, so basically just need to trim it to here to do the West Coast line. So I will chop another piece out and get up to the loft. Okay, I probably learned the hard way, just I never measure up perfectly and chop to the lines. I always just give myself a little bit extra at one end, because you just find that when you actually present up the right piece, there's always a little bit of a short, so that'll allow me to just recut that in the loft. I suppose I could have cut this in one piece, but it would just really been difficult to fit and test fit repeatedly, so it's far easier to do them as two separate. Okay, so for the outer incline up, I've got a spare piece that I had made last year where I used to have 4 tracks on the incline up. So I had like an up and a down, and then I basically realised it was overkill, because you're only going to send one train up and down at one time, and then for the scenic sections there's always 2 tracks, so it does look like it's a up and down main line, even though one line is going to be the East Coast and one line is going to be the West Coast. This was a useful tip I picked up from, I think, Mr. Benchwork and Peter. Have a 2% incline board, because when you're playing around and with lots of different angles and slopes, it's just easier to slap down. So this one's slap the board down and stick a level on it, just to have a quick check rather than having to faff around with digital. So the board's always going to be at 2%, and obviously I know I'm there or thereabouts with that one, and I can sort of move it around quite quickly and try different locations. So that one is showing me at the moment going a bit too steep, which I know, because that shouldn't be up here yet, it should be much lower down, but I'll use this to set the right position. At least I know that this is where the start of the next incline board needs to come through, so I can play around with this on this board to get the right starting point. So a bit of readjusting, so that's happily at 2% still. On the incline, as you can see, I need to be about ½ centimetre below the framework at this point, so it gives me a good start to create something. So this is the outer incline. Obviously it still sits in a draft to protect the trains, but this part will be visible coming up, so I'll have a retaining wall along here, and I'll be able to see my trains effectively coming up, an extension of the road cutting around in front of Rugby. So I just want to have maximum visibility, and I pre-cut the end, the sort of the gap, and I'm sitting at 1.9%, so quite happy with that. So for the next board over, which sits here over the sort of throat of the London station below, I've got the 2 starting points for my inclines to keep carrying on up, and they should sort of level out just before that next B frame. So I will next make the next open framework now down in the garage, so that I can get these 2 sections finished as part of this episode. But hopefully this is making sense to people. white. Anyway, so that one's just got an extra brace in it, but the channel's still going to go through. The key one is build the whole thing upside down so that you're building it on the flat of the table, so that all the various bits of wood are level, so that when you flip it over, the baseboard sits smoothly on it. So that's the one thing I've learned from experience. So next thing to decide is the incline up on the middle one. Obviously I've cut this the same depth. I think it was a millimetre shallower than it is from the frame coming through, so I know at this point the incline is sitting at the sort of 2% carrying on up, and so I'm building it so that when you come to dismantle it, I can take the whole frame out with everything. Then it would just be a case of cutting the track at this point. So I will take that as the reference point at the start and then work out a 2% up and work out where it comes to.